God. Benvenuta, benvenuta, benvenuta. Mi chiamo Caterina. Oggi sto bevendo un espresso. Un espresso? No, un caffè greco. Alla tua salute. Stiniamas. To our health. Espresso today. Welcome to my episode and traveling to Italy with me today. I actually did my best to fit into that vibe, that very classy Italian vibe. I even wore my Italian sandals from Italy, made in Italy. And if you can hear, I'm playing some very gentle music just to get us into the vibe. And I hope that you join me along. Now, back around a year ago, as I mentioned in my last episode, or 2 episodes ago, I decided to bravely travel alone for the very first time and choosing Italy as my destination. I can honestly tell you it was an incredible choice, a nice choice. When I landed with the plane, the first place I landed was Rome. Can you imagine landing in Rome? And I remember landing in Rome alone for the very first time ever. I just took a deep breath and I felt a mix of emotions. I was nervous, I was excited, I felt all this exhilaration. I also kind of felt a little bit calm at the same time. And as I stood there for a few moments, I kind of felt that I was in someone else's body. I had to sort of just snap myself out of it, kind of put my arms behind my back and just give me a push and just remind me that, hey, it's you. You're here. Go. And then I realized that I had to go, and I had to go alone. And honestly, it was just a dream. This was something that only months ago I had called someone on the phone because my trip to Greece didn't pan out, and the word Italy came out of my mouth. And now here I was. I said it as easily as I would have ordered mashed potatoes versus French fries as a side order. That's how easily it came out of my mouth. I had never used Google Maps. I was thinking, oh my gosh, how am I going to get around? I took up my phone, I figured it out, and off I went. And where did I go? To the train station. The train station in Italy. The train station in Italy is not like the train station in Montreal, where I live, where I'm from, where you purchase a ticket. And on the ticket, there's a time, which means that if your train is delayed, you're either going to be compensated for or you're going to go on the next train. Not in Italy. In Italy, you go to the train, you have your ticket, and on the screen it says that your train will be departing from that platform. And suddenly, you look up at the screen again, and your train number is no longer there. Oh my God, my train is not there anymore. Where am I going? I have my ticket. I'm asking everybody, excuse me. Of course, very few people spoke Italian that actually worked at the train station. And they're telling me, look at the platform. What platform? I'm looking at the platform. My train's not there. This is platform 3. And I'm oh, no, your train changed. It's leaving in 5 minutes. From where? Platform 27. Do you know where platform 27 was, guys? Platform 27 was running down 2 flights of stairs, under a tunnel, finding another flight of stairs going up, realizing that you're on the wrong side of where your train is, going back and running up the other flight of stairs, and then waiting for your train. And you know what? Your train already passed. Your train that had been rerouted to another platform. That train, that left. You missed it. That was my very first experience in Rome. Was my train experience. But you know what? Let me tell you, by the end of my trip, I mastered every train station there was. I figured out every little screen, and I had those sneakers on, and I was ready to run, because the terminal could change in 5 minutes. So Catherine, get ready. And I did. Now, Rome was just incredible and historical. I mean, I visited absolutely every church I could. Somebody said to me, oh, you know what, Catherine, if you visit one church, you visit all the churches. No, absolutely not. Every single church was beautiful, unique. I went to St. Paul's Cathedral. I can't even begin to tell you the feeling I had, the unbelievable feeling that I was there. And pizza. Let me tell you about pizza in Rome. Here we order pizza, 2, 3, 4 different toppings perhaps, same kind of dough, more or less. Not in Rome. In Rome, you order a pizza every day that you've never ever had before. And that's what I did. When I was in Rome, I had a different pizza every day. By the end of my trip, I kind of, didn't want to have pizza, but I can honestly tell you that having pizza in Rome was wonderful. And not only was having pizza in Rome a wonderful experience, but the people, the sightseeing. I think when I was in Rome, I did probably about 2 or 3 tours. I went to the Colosseum, magical as well. And it was just fantastic. Since I was alone, I had the freedom, I had the liberty to choose to get up anytime I wanted, eat anytime I want, go anywhere I want, and not feel like I was responsible for anybody else. So I was walking in front of a church one day, and there were all these wonderful people dressed in fancy clothes. Curious me, I had to see what was happening. So I walked to the church. There was a wedding going on. So I asked if I can look at the wedding, observe the wedding. And surprisingly, yes, of course you can come in. So I went in. I said, can I sit? Of course you can sit. But the most interesting part was, this was not an Italian wedding. This was a Pakistani wedding. And there was it was not a very big wedding, but it was a very flashy wedding. I'd say there was about 50 guests. And I casually introduced myself, told them where I was from, and told them, I'm very interested in seeing how, your tradition, how traditionally you celebrate a wedding. And they invited me to stay for the entire ceremony and for their dinner. I actually stayed for their dinner. And it was great. I mean, I took pictures with them. I was allowed to take videos of them. So it was quite an experience. Now, after I finished traveling to Rome, I had around 4 other cities that I was scheduled to go. One of them was Bologna. Now, I hope I'm pronouncing this right. I really tried. I have a cold as well, but it's Bologna. Now, Bologna was very different from Rome. Naturally, they all have their very unique styles. But what made Bologna very different from the other cities that I visited is their portico. And a portico is an arch, like an arch over a building, and it's full of porticos. So when you're walking in the sidewalk, you cannot see the sky, because when you're walking on the sidewalk, any sidewalk all over Bologna, and you look up, there's an arch. And the reason that they build these arches that go way back into the 11th century was because it was a hierarchical situation. And the elite actually, when they were on their horses, would travel on the portico, where the commoners were traveling on the muddy dirt, as road, where they weren't protected by the rain or any type of weather. And this is why originally they built the porticos, and then as the city developed and it became more populated and it needed more people to accommodate, they would actually build lodging apartments above the portico. So you had the sidewalk, and then on top was the arch, and on top of the arch were actual apartments. And so this was very, very common in Bologna, and some of them were just incredible. I mean, the artists. I think one actually, Michelangelo, I could be wrong, don't quote me on that, but I think if it wasn't him, some very famous painters that actually still have their paintings on the porticos now. And that's what was very significant in Bologna. I did a lot of local traveling. I met a lot of local people. I met a lot of friends, but that's what stood out on my trip to Bologna. I also visited Florence. Now, Florence, known as Firenze, is also a very different city. I met a young girl in Florence who had never, ever, ever traveled in her entire life. She was coming from a small town in Italy. I think it was, she was telling me it was kind of a village. I don't remember the name. And she had never traveled, and she was really excited. And we meet up in Florence. Now, we met in one of our tours. And she didn't speak a word of English, and I did not speak a word of Italian. I mean, Google Translate, but really. But we just hung out together for 3 consecutive days, every single day, and we had the best time. I mean, Google Translate, out we go, and we were looking at each other and showing each other's phones. I mean, what an experience. And what was really, really nice was that she wanted to go visit the Tower of Pisa. And but she didn't want to go alone. So, and it was something that she always wanted to do, and that's why she had actually chosen to go to Florence. And she says, she didn't say, Google Translate said, would you like to come and visit the Tower of Pisa? Yeah, and off we went. And that was my experience in Florence, meeting this wonderful young girl who herself had never traveled anywhere outside that little village or that little town that she was from. She must have been in her late 20s, early 30s. I mean, younger than me. Anybody that's 30 is very young, in comparison to me. And so that was quite an experience myself. Now, I also went to Venice. And I get it. I absolutely get it. Seeing pictures of Venice, seeing videos of Venice. Yes, it's magical. But I can honestly say that Venice was a little bit too much for me. I'm so happy I went, don't get me wrong. But there were just way too many people. Way too many people. In fact, we were all travelers or tourists. And in fact, our tour in Venice mentioned to us that all the locals had actually moved out for a few reasons. One of the main reasons were because it had become so touristic, and it was a lot more profitable for the locals to rent out their places as Airbnbs and go find a place and rent inland versus them staying in Venice. And then the other reason was to maintain these properties were also very, very costly. They're beautiful, but they need a lot of maintenance. And for the locals who could not maintain that, that was a bit of a struggle for them. So Venice, beautiful, yes. Picturesque, yes. A dream, yes. But like in most European tourist spots, we have taken over. But I guess that's the way it is. And that was something that I was a little bit disappointed in, how there was no way in order to control this. So the locals could appreciate their island a little bit more. And in fact, there were a lot of little islands. That's how Venice is constructed now. A lot of little islands that are connected by stairs. So you go up the stairs, down the stairs, and suddenly you're on another island. And these islands, way back, were actually little places, little farms where the herdsmen had their animals. So it's very interesting to find out all this wonderful stuff. And now we'll go to Milan. Now, I'm not describing my trip in order because I don't really remember it. But Milan, what could I say about Milan? I get out of the train station. For those of you who have visited Milan, you know what I'm talking about. For those of you who have not, when they say this is the fashion capital, yeah, we are not downplaying that. This is the fashion capital. I think that was the city that I saw the most amount of people that were dressed in suits, and I mean no casual dressing, very few casual dressing in Milan. Everybody was so well dressed. It was just beautiful to see, because we don't see that many people wearing suits today, either men or women. But in Milan, it was just they were everywhere, and it was so nice to see that. But going back to the train station, this is how I tend to get off topic sometimes. The train station is like a museum. First of all, it took me forever just to physically get myself out, because that's how big it is. But just to spend some time in the actual train station is a trip in itself. And when I was in Milan, I did a lot of coffee hopping. Well, I did that all over Italy. But what was interesting in Milan, and actually in Italy as a whole, is that dogs are allowed absolutely everywhere, in coffee shops and just everywhere, in shops, in stores, in boutiques. And I found that surprising, because, here, that's not the case. I mean, there's a few here and there, but, it says dog cafe, but there everybody brings their pets everywhere. And I remember the first time I saw that, I was surprised, and I wasn't aware, so I walked in, and there was this older man, and his name was Giovanni. They would call him Gio. And we struck up a conversation. Very interesting man, spoke a little bit of English. I did my Google Translate, and he asked me where I'm from and so on and so forth. And we developed a little friendship, Gio and I. So every morning while I was in Milan, he would go and get his coffee with his dog. I'd go and meet Gio, and we'd have a chit chat for an hour, and it was wonderful. So that was my Milan experience, amongst everything else. But I had to mention my friend Gio. So this is a little bit about my trip to Italy. And, on my Instagram, on my Facebook, I'm posting several little videos that you can hop onto and enjoy if you want to get a more real feel of the trip. Now, traveling solo, I must admit, is not for everyone. When I share this with my friends or my family, some of them said, wow, and some of them said, oh, not for me. And I completely, completely get that. But if you are that person who's thought about it and never felt courageous enough to actually embark on something like that, I strongly recommend it if you are that kind of person. Because on a personal level, this trip and going solo completely, nothing around that was familiar to me, it allowed me to discover so many things about myself. I met so many locals and travelers. And it really did give me the freedom and the independence that perhaps I needed. And I didn't know that I actually needed because I was too fearful before. And it also allowed me to travel at my own pace and, to live in the moment, because it did happen to me often when I was exploring all these different areas that, I'd spend like a whole day looking at something, visiting a place, and then going back home to my Airbnb, or depending on where I was staying, where I was, and thinking, oh my gosh, I want to go back. I want to go back to that place, and I want to spend another entire day because I may have missed something, and I don't want to have that feeling. And so it happened to me often that I would visit a particular place, and then the following day I would go back and spend an entire day just, absorbing it all in. And although I absolutely love all my friends and they're terrific friends, I don't know if that would interest them. And why would it? They're not me. So again, for many reasons, this being one of them, traveling alone allowed me that freedom and that opportunity. And so, as I mentioned a couple of episodes again, I did book myself a trip to Greece solo again. And moving forward, I think this is something that I could see myself doing for a very, very long time. If not every single trip moving forward, probably the majority of them. Now, sharing all this with you guys, I hope you enjoyed it. Again, it's a very condensed description of what I actually experienced and saw, but I highly recommend it. And now to share a little wisdom with you, a little Greek coffee wisdom. Traveling alone for the very first time is it's actually a feeling of being born again. Really just finding yourself alone somewhere, and this feeling of, I don't know, here I am for the very first time in a different life, in a different version of myself, and discovering not only a different kind of beauty, because you do discover that, but you also discover your own beauty. And I don't mean physically, I mean internally. Physically, what you see, of course, because what you observe is naturally, very beautiful in its own definition, but also your inner beauty as well. And that's what I felt when I explored this magnificent place on this planet. Now, thank you for listening to my story about my trip to Italy. I'm sorry I have a little cold today. And until next time, I just want to remind you that life's a little better when you go off topic. Thank you.